everybody, and welcome to episode 498. I said that right, Abe. 498 of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Heezy. I'm joined by Pro Tour competitor, Abe Stein.
498 is so many, and I don't even remember what the exact. I never remember the number.
I've told you multiple times you're starting.
I know. I'm just bad with numbers.
I'm just gonna have to look it up.
I do know that I was here for 400 though,
yeah.
And definitely for 365. I remember that one. So probably is coming up on like what? That makes it like near the 150 mark.
I think you're like creeping up on like beating out Casey and Matt for like most episodes.
I mean, yeah, I'm getting close to the 200 mark.
Yeah,
we're up there, which is crazy to me still.
Yeah, we are going to be talking about Abe's Pro Tour experience. Mason got home. His voice isn't feeling well. Got that post convention sore throat, and he, Mason, take a week off. It's fine.
That guy Gabs. Yeah. I got some chance to hang out with Mason in person, which is always a blessing. And man, he just talks.
We aren't going to talk about Mason today. We're going to talk about the Pro Tour. We're going to talk a little bit about Standard, a little bit about Pioneer. Before we do that, we want to talk about Always Improving. And can I hijack Always Improving to kind of a vent or a rant for me this week, Abe? This weekend at an RCQ, I was unfortunate again to get an unintentional draw, which I don't think I've ever had at an RCQ. I had one in a 1K playing the Mason's Urion deck. In the mirror match, I got an unintentional draw there, but like that was my last unintentional draw in Magic. And this player that I was playing against, he had already had an unintentional draw, and then even in his winning it, had to get a concession out of a third unintentional draw in a 5-round tournament. And I don't know this person. This is the first time I've ever played against them. They were really nice, but I want to talk about play clock equity because I have a really big problem with players who unfairly use the play clock. That they see 50 minutes as a shared 50 minutes that anyone has access to at all times, and in all things, and in all play. Like, it is crazy to me, the amount of gabbing and decision-making. And a few weeks ago, I talked about, like, that's not fair. Like, you should be trying to use 25 minutes of that clock at most. And if you're using more than that, then you're taking advantage of the rules. And it really upsets me, as the control player, people are like, oh, well, like, you're going to get unintentional draws with that because, like, it's really hard to win fast. It's like, no, I can see the game going really quickly. My opponent would not concede after they were dead for many turns against blue-white. Like, they had no chance of winning and just kept playing. And not only did they keep playing, they, like, kept doing things that didn't matter. And, it's hard. It's like, one, whose fault is this really? Like, I picked a deck that people are prone to not concede against, right? That they're like, oh, just like, if I get my out. And, like, that's not how it works, right? Because I have cards too. But what I have a really big problem with is if you're talking to me, every time I cast a spell, you talk about how cool my deck is. You talk to me about my sleeves. You talk to me about my playmat. You talk to me, like, it's like, dude, like, I'm playing a blue-eye control deck. We need to play Magic. And I think that more often than not, we as Magic players need to consider, like, if we finish our match, we can talk after. We can communicate after. And I don't want to be held hostage to you using the play clock. That is not fair. And I don't know. I don't think my opponent slow played. I think that they did things within the rules, but I have once again. I'm just going to say I think the rules are broken. I think that in a perfect world we would have a chess clock where that could not have happened. I took up probably less than 17 minutes of that 15 minutes, and that is unfair to me for a person that is like. I'm a really honest Magic player. We obviously had a tweet go viral about my, calling judges on myself like this year. And I can't handle it anymore. And I'm going to get on my soapbox. I'm going to say this. Hold yourself accountable. And to me, I'm going to say, I need to be more forward about this type of stuff. Because I'm really scared, Abe, of presenting myself as like, hey, you need to play faster and we need to stop talking because I don't want to offend people. I'm like scared of hurting people's feelings, and part of that has to do with the podcast. Part of that has to do with being known in Utah Magic, and like it's hard, and it's something that I need to fix. But at the same time, I really hope people realize like how rude it is to hold your opponent hostage in a match of Magic. And it's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, pace of play is always tough, and I think especially as more players come in from digital, where that's managed for you, to paper where it's not. That's like continues to be more and more of a growing pain. Like in the sealed PTQ at MagicCon, there was like a lot that I saw of things like that, of players who and even some players, watching like some of the construct events, watching some of the standard event, like when I was walking by and birding that, players just didn't really have the kind of mechanics or like the kind of understanding of like, okay, how long am I taking here? Or like what is a reasonable like amount of time to make a decision? And it can be hard. I think that I personally, like, just as a bit of like, my anecdotal experience with it, like I will hold a lot of conversation while we're shuffling, while we're like presenting deck and stuff. But this happened to me in the top.
The 2 slaughters?
No, this was the 4 slot PT like rebound PTQ where like all the PT players played, and it was single elimination. So it was like the round before the finals. I'm playing against a really, really nice guy from Australia who is playing Lotus, and we're kind of talking about the event life. I was talking about my job, talking about like we're just having like a really good conversation. And I mulligan to 6 in game 2, like while we're kind of like picking up where we left off between game 1, and I like finish my sentence, and like he goes to like respond to me like, "Hey, I'm bottoming this card," and just like play my land and pass. And we just play from there, right? Right. I cut off the conversation really naturally. I was like, I'm not gonna, I'm not continuing this, or like, hey, like we can talk after, like let's just go.
I agree.
And make the game what it is. It's hard, especially at a local level, when it's not someone who you're just meeting, or like someone who, it's not like I'm playing against someone who just played the Pro Tour.
So that's my always improving moment. Also, my deck was sweet, by the way, Abe. It was really good. So, just saying.
My always improving moment, I don't know. It's like hard to know even where to begin. There's just a lot that you get out of the PT. Like when you're working, preparing for a Pro Tour, and you're even playing it, and like the experience you get in it. Like I got to play. I died in round 7 of the Pro Tour, but I got to play. That means 7 matches, including drafting with just some of the best Magic players in the world.
Dude, your draft pod was something.
It was. I also think I came within a hair of escaping with a much better record than I did. I mean, I was literally downwind of Jesse Hampton, and then to his right was Seth. Yeah. So it was like I'm downwind of the undefeated player after day 1 and the eventual winner. In my draft pod. It was tough, but I'm gonna say like pretty blanket. My biggest always improved moment of the weekend, probably just how completely divorced from the result of my matches I was able to be. Like, all in all, we'll get into it a bit, but like my events, every event I played this weekend, I won very few matches of Magic this weekend. I played the Pro Tour where I went 2-5 and dropped. I played a Steel PTQ where I had a very hard pool to build. I think I built it really well, and then I lost my first 2 matches and dropped. I played the PTQ rebound where I won 3 matches and then lost in the 4th, and that was really all the Magic I played. But I came away from the entire experience and everything, and even going through all those losses in just a really, really good mental space, like feeling really good about how I'd played. And even though I, have fallen back off the tour, after kind of knowing I was going to be playing this event for so long, I just felt so good about the process, the preparation, all of it together, and like taking away what I have from it in terms of the players I got to work with. I hope I get to work with again. The matches I got to play, the experiences I got to have, and everything. And that was so much more enhanced. And I feel like I played so much better overall, and was really like playing at such a high level because I was just enjoying that piece of it, just enjoying the gameplay I was having and trying to make the right decisions all the time, and that has stuck with me for the last few months, I feel like. And even like into qualifying, I feel like that's kind of been where I've been at. But to really feel it on the level of I just had my worst PT performance to date. I like 1-2'd my draft pod with a deck I thought was better than that. I felt like I couldn't buy a win in constructed. It was like my deck was just not functioning in a lot of spots. I had like some really really tight decision calls that maybe I made like the second best decision, or just came up a little bit short. Played these really tough games, and lost a lot of them. But at the end of it, like I'm not qualified for the next Pro Tour. That's fine. I believe myself to be able to get back. I'll continue doing what I'm doing and continue playing at the caliber I'm playing at. And to feel that secure in just my performance and all that is really something that I have not necessarily felt at the other times in my life where I've qualified for the Pro Tour.
I love it. I think.
Yeah, we can get more into that. I think.
I mean, we're gonna dive into both your Pro Tour and the Pro Tour overall, but I don't know. That is the mental space that I think that a lot of players, when they finally reach it, start to actually do better at these things and really, go further. And there's some people that just right off the bat are just crushers, right? But I really love where your head is at, and I think that it's going to help you. If you want to support the show, head on over to patreon.com/ccmpg, become a patron of the show. $5 or more gets you into the Discord, gets you the bonus episodes, $5 or more gets you everything. There's a ton of things going on in there, and we really appreciate it. Don't forget to check out our sponsors. We have Heavy Play. This is one of our sponsors. You can use the code CCMTG for 10% off at Heavy Play. Just click the link in the show notes and head on over there. Untapped GG is our other sponsor, and this week I got to old man it, dude. I was playing the Vamps deck, and I was I don't even remember how many matches I played because I'm watching kids doing other stuff between it, and I was able to go back and see. Okay, I played 4 red black decks, but I only played 3 Vampire Mirrors in the 5 matches that I played. The other match, of course, was against the blue-black Gaming Thief deck. But that's so cool to be able to do that, because I struggle with that so much when I'm not taking notes, or when you're queuing. You want to look back on okay, how am I actually doing things like that? I just think that Untapped GG is a great resource. Use our affiliate link in the show notes, and it actually just every time you do it and every time you sign up, it's a kickback to the show. So let's go to our main topic. We're going to talk about the PT. We're going to talk about Magic Fest. But I want to start with you, Abe. We've talked about this a little bit. I just want to ask, you worked with Sanctum of All for this Pro Tour.
Yes, I did.
And what was preparation like?
So, I gotta say, it was a really, really cool experience to get to work with such a high caliber team. A lot of players who maybe a lot of people don't know, or maybe only half the top 5 names on that team people really knew, but everyone was really in there giving it their all through the process. And for me, my involvement, knowing especially with some real life stuff that had come up, I was probably not going to have as much time to really get into the trenches with Constructed, with Pioneer, as some of the rest of the team. And I was still going to try to and I still was able to be around to jam some matches of decks as they were getting solidified, be a sounding board for ideas, and focus on having my limited opinions come together and talk through drafts people and Bird for that stuff. So that was really a lot of my contribution. But overall, team kind of landed in 3 camps. There was a camp of players who wound up playing Rakdos midrange, kind of championed by Jake Beardsley. There were a few players who played Is It Phoenix, including Rainey, and then there was 5 or 6 of us that wound up playing the Jeskai Creativity deck. That, if you were watching coverage, you might have seen my teammate Jason make a very, very deep run in the event, lose 2 win-ins on their part. And they really, between them and Kane, the 2 of them did an immense amount of work in like creating that deck, making sure the mana worked, talking over every slot. And that was something that just being a part of those conversations, you know, giving my feedback, my feel, kind of talking through things from a high level, you know, seeing them play the games and talk about it, and kind of the process for how that deck came to be, of combining some of the ideas floating around between different camps and some information that we had like stumbled into through some people playing leagues and kind of like starting to reverse engineer other teams' decks that they were working with and things like that. It really led to that Jeskai deck being what it was, where I think it was, if not for maybe the Izzet Phoenix matchup was still very close, might even be a little Phoenix leaning, but like all of our other matchups, Amalia, like traditional Rakdos Vampires kind of took us off guard a bit, but like Amalia, Convoke might have been like one of our. I think Convoke was like our worst matchup of all the ones that were out there, and that deck was not one we expected to be very good. And everything else, we had a really good game against. We all felt like favored in the blue white matchups after kind of breaking down where we thought the metagame would be like, where it was like Lotus, blue white, Rakdos, Phoenix, and Amalia would be like the top 5 decks, and then some amount of floating around these other things. We really nailed it on that based on the feel of things. Like getting to really sit in and listen to a lot of conversations and be part of a lot of conversations around, okay, what are the decks and the fringes that we should make sure we're caring about, and you know, how are we really allocating all the slots. You know, in limited, we had a total of like 8 hours of discussion of every single card in the set and kind of like ranking it in
limited meetings are the literal most fun thing in Pro Tour testing. I just gotta say, I'm so jealous.
Draft meetings are really, really fun. They're also a lot of organizational work and a lot of
you just need a Spencer, man. That's what I do.
Yeah, you need someone who can lead it so that you don't get off topic and don't get derailed. We spent a lot of time like, you know, kind of making sure we weren't getting in the weeds, but coming out of it with like what we felt was a really, really strong approach to the format, really good understanding of it. A big takeaway I had from it was something that I kind of forgotten in the era of doing like draft leagues and kind of thinking that this is more of only a like team draft thing, of taking like the value of just taking the strong cards and trying to make sure you have the strongest cards available to you and working around that, as we were all kind of talking over how we would draft to try to 3-0 to 3-0 pod, as that being like the goal because it's in pod play. And it was just a lot of like really, really great opportunity insight, not only like share what I had, but also what the team had. Ultimately, like really, Jason and Kane had done such a good job on that Jeskai deck that it was hard for me to say no to it. It made a lot of sense to me from the view I was taking on the format of like, I don't really want to play a lot of Arclight Phoenix Mirrors or run the chance that people overcorrect in their sideboards and like have a lot of hate for the deck. Like I know that Misplaced Ginger was playing Leyline of the Voids in his Rakdos sideboard because he just talked to a lot of Phoenix players and just kept asking, what's the graveyard hate spell that is the most troublesome out of Rakdos? What should I play? And they're like, yeah, Leyline of the Void is like probably the hardest. And so it was like, all right, well, that's the one I should play. If all of the people I'm talking to say like that's the one they want to see the least, that's the one I should play the most of, and kind of like rebuilding the deck from there. So like if that had happened on a wide scale, you know, the deck did very well at the tournament, but it wasn't really where I wanted to be, and it was kind of deck that I think would have really worn me down and not been where I wanted to be, versus a deck I felt really, really comfortable with the amount of reps I had in playing like the Jeskai control deck with Creativity Atraxa. So that's kind of how my prep went as a very high level. I really just want to say again, I'm very grateful for Sanctival letting me test with them. They're a fantastic team of players, most all of whom are underrepresented in Magic. And that was just a really, really cool thing to bring like my years of experience and be able to offer what I could and what I did, and also get to benefit from some of the most talented minds in Magic I've worked with in memory. So,
well, I gotta say, like, you know, I think that you know, Kane's 6'4" is nothing to like ignore. I think that like if anything, I might still run this through a league or two to like, you know, see what the masses could give your constructed deck, because I think that Yorion Creativity is like a really interesting take on the creativity deck and could solve a lot of the problems that the creativity deck has overall. Like, obviously your guys' list is extremely tuned when you look at the numbers, but I would not be shocked to know that, like, there is something within Yorion Creativity that is, you talked a little bit about it in our Discord, but like, like, okay, like, if the other lists were like really heavily on Shark Typhoon, some of the new lists they're planning to do some, like, understanding what the 80 cards could be instead of that 60 that was so, like, there were not a lot of flex spots in the red blue deck. And to be honest, if you think about, like, not relying on a combo and just having, like, oh, I just can fit 4 creativities in because I'm an 80 card Yorion deck. That's a whole different type of deck that I don't know. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of came out of a big desire by a lot of the team and something they'd worked on for a long time, before stumbling into like creativity being the angle they wanted to take and trying to make that mana work to have like lockdown creativity and like memory deluge in a deck. Was there's a player Talia, and fair take on Jeskai was just put Fable and like I think I played Regal Caracal as like a value thing to like copy with it and just like have a way to like really just take over a board. And Faye requalified. So Talia did a really good job with that deck. I think they went like 4-2 in limited and 6-4 in constructed to 10-6 and requalify with that same kind of take. And so that approach was really like, okay, let's take the existing Yorion deck and push Yorion a little bit further and find a way to make our deck more proactive. And the creativity stuff really did that. I liked it enough that I was still really confident and comfortable playing it in the PTQ on Sunday when you're able to audible decks. Like, I could have tried to find a copy of Arclight Phoenix. I had friends at the event. Like, I could have found just another deck in general. But I ran it back, and like even the game I lost to lose that match, I felt like I could have played a little bit better, to not get like exactly like exactly the right 2 cards on my opponent to kind of break me up and draw out of the situation they were in to win the one as Lotus. But it was just like a lot of great work by them. The deck really does feel good to play, but I'm not sure right now it's very good because I think the Rakdos Vampires matchup is pretty tough. That deck is very, very good against the blue-white archetypes.
I'm curious, is there anything from your event that we haven't talked about? We kind of covered most of it. But is there anything from your event that you want to talk about, or should we move on to, like, I don't know? Like, we have what we learned in this podcast at the end of the show, but like, is there anything that you learned from the event that you want to cover?
I think the thing, and it's more like a personal thing for me, this event really taught me a lot, and especially working with this team taught me a lot about, a lot of the diligence that goes into kind of iterating and deck building in a way I hadn't seen before. Seeing that process was really great, and being a part of that process was really great. And even just playing at the PT level against the players I did, I learned, like, I don't know, you just learn so much about like the small things from like playing and watching at that caliber. It's hard to like really quantify it with like a takeaway, except for maybe that it's like plan beats no plan at like such a high level. Seeing Kane and Jason succeed with a deck that they poured like, probably combined 100 hours into 100 hours preparation into, and like as a team, like, somewhere around that number, put that much time into, and seeing their success, like that process that they have and that I was able to be a part of really does work. And it really just affirmed for me, like, combining the process with the really, really tight technical play that those players have and that we all strive for, like, that is what it takes to succeed at that level. And it's just such a strong reminder. It's hard to not like come away from playing a PT without feeling like I want to go back there and do it better the next time, because I see all the times where I could have played perfect, or I could have played a little bit better and maybe gotten that edge, maybe had things break my way, like, that 1% more often. If I get that one win, maybe I win my last round and I make day 2, right? Like, it's always that feeling and always that chase. And that's really really my biggest takeaway from all of it.
I love it. Well, I don't want to take too much time on the show. I got to watch a lot of the PT. I got to follow really closely on Twitter. I even when we were at Oasis, like in the RCQ, like their front TV had the PT on, and like we got to walk over there and just watch the PT, talk about what's going on and things like that. And I watched basically the entire top 8. I did miss some of the win-and-ins and stuff like that. But had it on the background during my playtesting and things like that. Really, really had a magic-filled weekend. It felt like, in a lot of ways, for me as a spectator, like the old days for me, where like, I would grind Magic, I would consume Magic, I would live and breathe Magic, and I really loved it, Abe. And there were a lot of things. The first thing is, the second that I saw that there was a Vampires deck, I went to go look at it. I also saw your deck. I think right before the article dropped, you posted Did you know that your deck was gonna be in the this article of like the spiciest
I
things with approach?
assumed it would be because of just the fact it was a really uncharted territory for the format that had been paved. I did put it in the Discord with the approval of my teammates. Like, it was like once deck list had been locked in, it's an open deck list tournament.
Did you guys know that the article was going to come out?
We did not. There, I don't know that anyone was contacted about like that deck being highlighted.
Okay, it was funny because like you posted in the Discord and it had to be like 8 hours later or something. The article goes up and I was like, well, all right, well, yeah, I hope some people. If this deck is sweet, I hope our patrons got some leagues in with it. But yeah, so I like read that article and saw the Vamps deck and I was just like, okay, this is something like Soren has always had that like the potential meter. I don't really know what to call it, where you're like, this is a 3-mana planeswalker that obviously is, if stuff is good, is like crazy, right? And I don't know. I was just looking at the mono black Vampires deck by Paul Rietzel. I was trying to see if Paul tested with CFB. I was going to be interested to know if they just did not agree. Luckily, we will have a person on our podcast next week that can give us the info and the behind the scenes of how that deck came to be. But it was really cool. Like, it's different viewing a tournament that Seth is in the top 8 for me. Having worked closely with Seth for a year and just viewing him as a friend and like, I hope that, if you haven't been listening and you don't know, it's like Seth did a year on CC as my co-host, and I respect him and his just insane ability to just play matches of Magic, the way that he carries his emotions on his sleeve. I really enjoy Seth, and also he has like one of the best laughs in the world. Like if you've ever heard Seth laugh, it's pretty freaking great. But I also got to learn a lot about a couple things. So if you look at the Pro Tour and like you look at the coverage of it, the obvious thing that people are going to cover is the Breakout deck, right? They're going to cover Rakdos Vamps, the work that Sam Pardee and team put into that deck, and them, winning the event, right? But one of the things that I see. Also, do I need to roll it back? I talked about Kane's record. Was Jason Yee on your team too?
Yeah, Jason.
I'm
is
so sorry.
Jason and Kane.
Anti-shout to myself. Also did amazing. My bad. Anyway, is it Phoenix like for a deck that was like one of the? I'll just say like what I heard going into this event, and I'm kind of curious if this lines up with you. There were specific decks. Blue-White Control was crushing it online, and Amalia combo had no bad matchups outside of Blue-White Control, and I mean that's what the data said. And then Is It Phoenix was the most consistent deck. Is that accurate from like your testing house, like going into testing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality on things was that like the Amalia deck had too much, since the last time the farm had really been checked in on had pressure on it at the RC. Amalia had become a more known quantity and was getting hated out by more decks had better plans, and Amalia's positioning had fallen a bit because no one's putting in the work to try to innovate Amalia and like actually sort it out because there's not the pressure on it. So as it was, like the blue-white matchups, like the blue-white decks were good against Amalia to a concerning degree to play Amalia, but and Phoenix was just like a very, very solid, good deck that we felt like most people would be gravitating towards. And then we didn't want to play blue-white because we felt like it was too exploitable with where it was, hence leading to our innovations.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that you guys landed on your team landed kind of where I think that they should in a lot of different ways. Where as I heard people talking about blue white, I think that blue white in the right circumstances is really good. I think that No More Lies is a legitimate addition to the deck. I think that we finally have a dig through time deck in Pioneer, which just has not been true. And the fact that it gets to be true, it's pretty cool. Like I think it's a cool thing. That being said, I expected Lotus Field to get more hate. I'm always surprised when Lotus Field does really well, because to me it feels like such an easy deck to hate out but I really undervalued Archmage's Charm, which is funny because it's I think it's just one of the sweetest cards ever. Really, just seeing that card, the utility of that card, and what it did for these decks all weekend was impressive. The other thing is we had Lotus Field. Did you listen? I actually don't want to know this, Abe. Did you listen? Do you know that I top 4'd a 1K with team event, and we had Lotus Field on our team?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You did listen. I love you. You're such a good co-host. So one of the big misses that we had is we didn't have Fae of Wishes. And that, I think, changes that deck a lot.
Yeah, I think that the Lotus heads figured it out in a big way, and I think Archer's Charm is just Archer's Charm makes the most sensible fit in a Lotus Field for many reasons. A, triple green is a trivial thing for the deck to accomplish, and B, so many of the cards you want to have access to in your pre and post sideboard games are just creatures. We had to have plans for Dragonlord Dromokas and everything, and it's a lot. The deck is very, very good at using that card.
One of the matches that I didn't get to finish in our Team 1K, I don't know if it was turn 3 or I think it was turn 3. We had a Niv Mizzet and a Dromoka in play. The deck does some crazy stuff now because you get to both change how you're playing your main deck, and then with Fae Wishes it goes even harder. So it's really cool to kind of see that. So that's kind of my viewer experience. Other than the fact that is Simon Nelson the luckiest human in the world? I don't know if you got to watch any of those matches because you were playing, Abe, but the number of times where it's all right, I guess he drew lethal. I guess he drew lethal. I guess he drew lethal. All the while, we've all played against Boros Heroic. In a world of is it Phoenix and Rakdos midrange, this deck should not be doing well, and he made it look effortless.
I mean, I don't know if it was talked about on the stream at all, or if people saw it on Twitter, but Simon Nielsen almost missed the draft portion on day one.
I might have missed that. I'm sure
they were making on day one. They were making the announcements and everything, and they had everyone seated. And they were "Where's Simon?" And one of his teammates, they're "We're looking for Simon Nielsen." One of his teammates was calling him on the phone, talking to the head judge while they're making the announcements. We're not going to hold this for more than a couple minutes. He comes running down. I guess he needed to get his badge or something, or he was at a badge checkpoint and he had biked the end or something. It was something crazy where he was running so far behind that he was within a hair. It felt maybe if he wasn't Simon Nielsen, he might have just missed the draft portion and like been dropped in the
But
so for him to go from that to the finals is like the most Simon Nielsen story ever.
So maybe he is the luckiest human. Maybe that actually
he might be.
I mean, you have to be the top 4 pro level events in a row to be fair. Yeah, and great. You know, I'm not taking that away, but my learnings, I feel like I've covered some of them. I think that for the Pioneer section, I think this format's wide open. I think that everybody who's been complaining about it for the last, like, 2 months is, like, off the rocker. I will say that I've been working on working with my friend today while I was at work, just texting Matt Kling. Actually, I'll just announce it. We're going to do Green-White Devotion versus Rakdos Vampires for Constructed Clash this week. So, like, I think the format's pretty open. There's lots of ways to, especially because the Vampires deck, like, there's a pretty clear thing when you look at it, and as somebody who's played it, there's a pretty clear problem with the deck where, like, you have one Bitter Triumph for your big kill spell. That's it. That's all you got. That's all any of the list had.
Yeah, that deck's it does need some adaptation from where knowing coming into the Pro Tour where no one's deck can change after you playing a bunch of matches against that, but like it is ahead of the curve. It does have room to adapt. Yeah,
so, and to be fair, like, it's got the red-black shell, so, like, there's tons of room to adapt. Like, those Duresses, they are not going to stay in the main deck. You're going to need answers rather than, discard spells for a little while and stuff like that. But I love it. I think that Pioneer's so cool. I want to talk about Standard, though, because we did Standard last week, and I think we crushed it. I think that if you listened to constructive criticism, I basically told people to play blue-white, and that the literal 4 playable decks were blue-white, Esper midrange, Domain Ramp, and Boros. That was it. Like, that's what you should play. And, Dimir midrange jumped in there, did a little bit better than Boros. But if you just listened to this podcast, I feel like Mason and I really gave an in-depth guide of, like, what's happening in this format, why is it happening, what are you doing? And the people that got the most punished, to be completely honest, were the people not ready for blue-white control, and the people that got the most rewarded were the Dimir mid-range players that were ready for blue-white control. That matchup actually gets really hard once those Dimir players are ready for the matchup.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know, for me, kind of watching it from a different angle, I also want to say shout out to 2 of the players in the top 8. Jarvis Yu, friend of the show, who's been on as a guest of ours before, squeaking in at 8th place with Domain. But also Jeffrey Carr, personal friend of mine for a long time, just a younger player in our area for a long while, been trying for many years to get on the Pro Tour, having a really innovative take on, not innovative, but a really up-to-date and well-built take on Esper, just doing really well. But, like, the story for me was these kind of cell-tie, self-mill decks.
So, do you want to talk about the first place deck?
I mean, it's really hard to talk about because I played and watched. I watched a little of it because I was watching Jarvis play out
the quarters.
Yes, I was watching him play the quarters. So it was right in the, like, PT play area at the event. So, like, on Sunday they had the limited PTQ top 32 where my friend AJ was in the top 32 and doing his draft and then playing his match. The quarterfinals and semifinals and ultimately the finals, the standard, 75K, and the rebound PTQ all in the same area. So it was, like, really sick to be able to, like, walk around in Bird and see all this stuff happen at once. And the deck looked really, really, really powerful, and I don't know how it is the case that Slogurk is just the best card, the most powerful card in Standard, but that's what it seems to be the case of, is that card is just so good, and CFT Sock is I think the best deck builder in the game, maybe the most innovative deck builder in the game right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can't argue with the result, and despite myself and many others questioning 68 over 69, like, you have reasons for what you do, and I think that's great. I will say, like, Slogurk has put the coolest part of this standard format into play, where you have blue-white control, you have, you know, a multitude of mid-range decks depending what you want to do. Boros, Gruul, or Mono Red Splash Green won a challenge this weekend. Mono Red aggro decks. You know, you've got tempo decks in Dimir and in Soldiers and Blue White, and then you have straight up combo decks in the form of Slogurk decks. And other than like traditional ramp, every archetype is covered in the standard format. Every single
I would say arguably domain functions somewhat.
No, you're actually right. You know what? You're right. Actually, I would say you're right in that every single archetype is covered. Like, straight up, this might be one of the best standard formats of all time.
Yeah, I do think it's really the like not only the Slogurk stuff, but also like Brian Zeng's deck from the top 8 with like what's called Squirming Emergence, which is 1 green-black, like return a non-land permanent from your graveyard with mana value less than equal to number of permanents in your graveyard, with a bunch of like sweet self-mill enablers and like descend.
So this deck has been. I don't like calling this. This is Sultai Reanimator. I really hate that they call this Sultai Control, but it is another combo deck.
Yeah, I'm saying like the combo decks emerging as a way to prey on the fact that the blue-white decks are so good and some of the mid-range decks are kind of falling out of favor. It's just really cool to see so many archetypes present and see it all coalesce. Like I agree, the format's in a really good place. I've even been saying, as someone who like for the RC and for the PT was playing a bunch of Modern Pioneer, that I was jealous of him getting to play Standard, because Standard I think is the best format in Magic right now.
No, I
think the best constructed format to be playing.
I think it is. We're really lucky for it to be Standard season, and that's kind of my thoughts and learnings from that. We talked about Pioneer, we talked about Standard. I want to ask though, you have a tournament tomorrow. What Pioneer deck are you playing? What Standard deck are you playing?
If I have a Pioneer tournament tomorrow, I mean, just on how much I like playing the Jeskai Creativity deck and how much I do believe in it, I think it might need some tuning to be able to handle the Rakdos Vampires deck, because those decks are so tuned against Blue X decks that I might hold off. Like, I'd want to play it, but I might play Rakdos Vampires instead, just because I think it is still in a phase where it's not being taken over. I think outside of that, Phoenix is a good choice. I'd personally play Creativity again. I love playing with those cards. It's hard to pry Lightning Helix and Teferi 5 and also like Fable and Atraxa and all that stuff from my hands when I have the opportunity to do it. I had a great time playing it. In Standard, I would probably play that Sultai deck, because I think that deck is very, very, very strong.
The Reanimator one or the 68 card one?
If I had to play tomorrow, I would play the Reanimator one. Okay, if I had to play a deck after a Hyperbolic Time Chamber session, maybe I would figure out how
to not have 68 cards in your deck.
Well, no, just how to Gurk. I'm not well versed in the Gurk, and unfortunately, I'm not even going to be playing any of the Standard format until the RC anyway, because I have already queued. So it's like, really, I'm looking forward to taking a month or so to play a lot less and kind of scale back and rest after the sprint I've been in.
So for me, as of this exact second, and after having way too many conversations about it today, I would probably play Green Devotion in Pioneer.
So that's really interesting. I spent a lot of time working on Green Devotion. I would be very intrigued to see what your list is.
I'll send you some stuff. One, I think that... So, I think that, like, every deck right now is weak to... a Sorin putting in a Vein Ripper. I just think that, as somebody who's done it a bunch now, like, that's not fair. If I wasn't going to play that, I would play. I do have an updated list of that tune for both the Mirror and Phoenix, and the fact that you're already favored against decks like Hidden Strings combo, like, it's a tough deck to beat. For Standard, like, I played a lot of blue-white. I've been touting Blue White. What is this? The fourth week on the show. They've been like, hey, like this deck is real. You should play it. And then second week I said it. Third week another podcast said it. That's is popular. Maybe got Jerry T on it. And then this week I'm like, hey, I've been saying this. I've been doing this. Blue White has some weaknesses. I had to get really unlucky to, I think, not win the RCQ this weekend. In like kind of different ways. I think that if you are a Magic player who is really good at flowcharts, you should play Blue White in Standard. If you are a Magic player that likes asking questions, I think you should stop playing Boros. I think that Boros has some problems, and then if you cannot fix the problems against for decks like Blue White, and I don't even know if you're favored against Domain right now, you're gonna struggle. However, I think faster decks like a Mono Red and Red Splash Green, which won the challenge, are really interesting to me because I think they are Blue White favored. And as if your events are going to be like a bunch of Domain and Blue White, and then that's great. That is not what Utah's metagame was, by the way. We had more Sheoldreds than I've ever seen in a tournament at ours, but yeah, that I think that like I'd either be on Blue White or I would be on. I think Gruul, man. Like I think like really heavy spell Gruul. So I've shown you the deck that won the challenge, and this I have played this deck today. Literally 100% of my matches in the last 2 days have been this or Vampires, and I'm not gonna lie, man. Like Scamp is so much better than every red one drop in the red deck that makes you want to play this. But like the red deck card quality is so much higher than this deck. It's kind of like this tug and pull. I had multiple matches today that I lost where 40% of my deck killed my opponent, looking at 40+% looking at just the untapped GG stuff. And one of the things I really like about this, whereas like the Tricks deck was like, I get to play with Fire in the main, I get to play with Witchstalker Frenzy in the main, and let me tell you how insane Fugitive Codebreaker is compared to the cards that I was playing before in the style of deck. It's like you go from like a 3 to like a 9.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this deck, I think there's a couple things going on. One is that the mana is so much better than the Picnic Ruiner decks, by way of not having to play a bunch of like single green spells to protect your Ruiners. And two, this deck draws a ton of its deck and has a ton of like cheap, fast impact cards. And I think, like, kind of to your point about, everything's really represented and like maybe it's time to get off of Convoke. Right, and like the mid-range decks have kind of gotten eaten up by the fact that not only is Domain here, but the control decks are like Blue Control is cropping up, and now these like really unfair over-the-top decks are popping up. Is that it really matters how you're attacking the format right now. There are some very strong answers and some very strong threats, and playing the right mix of threats to beat the mix of answers that are out there is really important. And this deck looks like it does that really well. It's so good against sweepers, which is the backbone of why Blue-White is so good right now. And it has so much natural and innate card advantage that it seems like it would pretty easily outvalue most decks trying to operate in its space.
Yeah, I think
we're
that
gonna be able
like
to overwhelm decks that excel at playing like one good card a turn. Like this should not have a problem with kind of having a 2-for-1 itself on a Preacher, for example.
Yeah, so I definitely have killed Preachers with like multiple shocks in this deck. So I think there's like two types of mid-range decks that people are playing, and it's actually really interesting in the standard format, where like you have your classic mid-range decks that might be like Rakdos and Green Black, right? It's very clear, by the way, that you should not play Rakdos midrange. It's just like actually not a good deck. the green-black mid-range deck is really good against all the other mid-range decks. Like, if you want to beat blue-white, blue-black, whatever mid-range pile somebody's playing, green-black is going to beat it, right? This deck is also really bad against green-black. However, it's really good against the other mid-range decks, right? Blue-white and blue-black are like, oh my gosh, this is actually too much. I can't keep up with this. This also is fast enough to crush things like Domain. So you're in that camp. Like you said, it's really good against sweepers. This is why this standard format is so good. Is, we're talking about a deck that, like, what does this cost? This is 39 ticks. 39 ticks on MTGO. When was the last time we talked about a $39 deck in standard?
Yeah, I mean that's the era we live in, honestly. It's a great time to be a standard player.
And $139 tabletop. I already bought the previous version of this deck. I just wanted to call it out. I think that it needed it on this episode. So that's standard. Is there anything else you'd like to call out before we wrap this podcast up? We went a little long. I didn't expect it this long.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot. We talked about two of the biggest events that have happened in the year and probably will happen until the next MagicCon. Like, that's kind of the cool thing. But the sad, I don't know, bittersweet thing about having MagicCons now and not really having so many, like a GB circuit, is that we get all the events to talk about at once across a bunch of formats, but they'll happen at once. Lots to say.
It is hard to cover on a podcast, right? Like, where you're like, oh, I really wish that I could cover the 75K, but I also have to cover the Pro Tour, and they happened the same day. And for one, I'm sure that's really fun. Like, I have not been to one yet. Maybe I'll go to Vegas. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too much into, the details of, the event and stuff, but I really just want to say, personally, it meant a lot. And I said this in the Discord, too. It meant a lot from all the patrons who I knew were cheering me on and were vocal about it. All the people back home, my play group locally, and just all the people I know have been really fan supportive of me as I had a chance to make a run at a PT again. And, personally, I kind of sat with, in the days leading up to the event, that the weight of the gap between my last PT appearance and this one, and kind of what that felt like, and what that meant of the amount of time since I started playing competitive Magic to qualifying for my first Pro Tour, the same amount of time, minus the COVID years, the MPL era was not possible to qualify for a Pro Tour really. Minus those 2 years, the same amount of time that from that Pro Tour qualification to this one. And really just to succeed in those eras and to still be playing, even now I feel like better Magic in a lot of ways than I was at that time, and to continue to improve and continue to feel better and better about how I play. It just has meant a lot, and the whole experience is great. But really, the things that make the whole experience mean so much to me is knowing that there are people out there who, cared and wanted me to succeed, and hearing that from my friends who were there, and having them come up when they were there, waiting on their 75K rounds and checking in on me, and all those things. Even as I had a rough day at the range, was it was just awesome. Pro Tours are awesome. Hope to make it back. Hope to be able to bring more great stories of it to the cast. But
you hear that? Abe is staying, fam. He's not going anywhere. He's gonna qualify for more Pro Tours and be here with me. That's gonna do it for the main episode. We do have a question from Austin on Patreon. Do you want to become a patron of $5 more? You can get access to the Patreon question. Can old decks like a Mono White come back into standard because of some of the new cards? I don't actually know what this card is.
Still needs the Mythic that costs 2 and a white and doubles triggers.
Oh, sure. So I think that this is always yes across. I don't think this is just standard for what it's worth. We saw a complete resurgence of blue-white because of 2 cards. We saw Deduce, No More Lies, and boom, blue-white's a standard deck. That's it, right? We saw in Pioneer we saw a 6-drop vampire get printed that they could cast because of Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, so that you're not like, doing something weird. Before the deck was playing a 5-mana vampire that was like fine.
Drew some cards, yeah.
Yeah, drew some cards. But like, when you looked at the deck, you could, because of Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, you could discard it like, boom, 6-mana vampire, all of a sudden Sword's playable. We got Pioneer covered, right? In Modern, we have also seen it, right? Like, Modern, we've seen it a lot of times, right? Where different things happen and stuff. I think that to answer the Patreon question specifically, though, because we're in the 3-year standard format, I thought Mono White was playable about, 5 weeks ago, for example. I don't know if that's where we're at now. So Mono White was occupying, the control slot in a lot of ways, where it was, trying to 1-for-1 you a bunch, or, hold down the ground until it board wiped, right? And there's just not a reason to commit to the board to do that when you have things like Deduce and No More Lies.
I kind of take a different angle on answering this question, because I think my answer is going to be better for longer saying this. Can old decks come back to standard because of new cards? The answer is always yes. I would say...
That's what I said. How is that a different answer?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Give me a second. Is your specific example of the cards you're talking about bringing back the archetype that you think might have a chance? Why don't you do it? Why don't you try? I think that if you think it makes sense for the deck that perform, right, what the deck you're envisioning and used to be good did, and what the cards that were doing it did, or if you don't know that, and why it was as good as did, or how it operated, maybe take some time to study that before you go and take the time to rebuild the deck with these new cards, to make sure you understand what kind of space you're operating in. But sure, show me. Because I don't know. I haven't played with these cards you're talking about in the standard format. I don't see other people doing it. But that doesn't mean other people haven't tried it. I don't think other people tried to play 68 card Slogurk, and that just won the 75K handily. It won, I believe CFT Sock lost the first round. They lost the first round to Convoke and won every other round they didn't draw.
That is correct.
So, I don't think anyone else tried to do that. I don't know anyone's tried to play Mono White with Delny and Temple players. Is what you're asking about.
I don't.
Try it.
I don't. How is your answer different than mine? How is your answer different than mine?
Because I think I don't want to answer any specifics. I don't have an opinion on this. I don't have an opinion on what. Well, I don't deign to have an opinion. I think probably the cards don't line up, but I don't know. I think that if you're asking this question, a better thing to do, or good follow-up to this question, is to go and do some of the work yourself. These are the kinds of questions that are great to follow up with your own work. Because if you believe in it, you should try it, and you will get better from doing it.
Yeah, I would just say watch Concerted Clash next week, right? We already talked about a ridiculous deck that. I just said green-white devotion, right? And Abe is like, what does that mean? What does that even mean, Spencer? And I think that so often one of the things that I've gotten worse at in Magic is believing in myself, right? There's so many times where you do something, you believe in it, and people are just gonna tear you down. We saw the tweets about vampires this weekend, right?
A lot of people eating a lot of words.
Yeah, people. It was so funny to see, but just believe in yourself. Also just shout out again to Next Level Magic. I think we've shouted out that book a bunch on this podcast, but it talks about this type of stuff, this type of concepts. So go read that. Show wrap up really quick. You can join the conversation by joining the Patreon Discord and the public Discord. Both of them have great access. Patreon Discord is $5 a month. Patreon.com/CCMTG. You can also leave a YouTube comment. If you do, it really does help the show. probably more than you could expect. As far as the YouTube algorithm is concerned, Abe, comments are the number one. Yep. The number one thing. You're like, oh, I liked the podcast. Like, I helped it. It's like, actually, you could not like the show and leave a comment, and it would catapult into the algorithm.
It is the only way YouTube has to know that anyone is actually engaging with the video.
Yep. So, that's why we've done YouTube comments for so long. Honestly, like, I removed YouTube comment segment from the show. If you want to bring it back, leave a comment. That's where I'm at. Leave a comment.
Good comments get read.
Yeah.
That's all. There will be the segment if there are comments.
Yep. Straight up, I've removed it from the show notes until we get those comments back. But, like, I know that when I talk about saving puppies or otters, or, the fact that, little ostriches, have you seen a little ostrich, Abe?
I have.
Dude, they're the cutest thing. And they turn into monsters. Like, I don't know if you've ever been next to an ostrich.
Like dinosaurs.
Yeah, they're dinosaurs. But, like, little baby ostrich, the cutest thing. Every comment you leave means that little ostrich won't turn into a human killer, because, like, obviously that ostrich is going to kill somebody. So, you can also go to Twitter, @CCMTG. You can also check out Drafting Archetypes, and then the rest of the Easy Game Media stuff. We'll cover that later. But, yeah, if you want the full trifecta, or it's actually more than that, like, comment, subscribe, review. That's it. Do that. The show will improve. The show will get more listeners, and we'll be able to do more. But before we do that, Abe, where can people find you?
You can find me over at twitter.com/morenothings. Now that I am no longer deep in the Pro Tour, I am available for coaching to help you achieve at the level that you are trying to achieve. I'm probably booking for dates starting in like mid to late next month or April. I've got some things I need to sort out. And also some clients I've been working with over the course of the time previous that I want to make sure I have time to prioritize getting back into my routine. But yeah, I would love to take on a couple more people if there are people out there interested. Yeah. How about you, Spencer?
Yeah, I'm just going to cover coaching really quick because last week I said I was done, and then after looking at my work schedule, I reached out to a couple people that I had already coached, and I just want you to know that, like, if you were like, oh, he reached out to me, and then I listened to the episode, that you're good. Like, I have the spots available that I reached out to, and then I forwarded everybody on to Mason. So, but I will also say, like, you can follow me at He's a Game. You can also just check out the other stuff I do. It's not posted yet, but, like, by the time this is posted, you'll probably see Mandalorian episode of the Need to Nerd podcast where we review nerdy stuff. If you love magic, you might love the Mandalorian. We talk in depth about, like, the problems with the newest season as well as things that we love. I don't think that it will happen before this podcast is posted, but I had to main Roy for a month in Smash Bros. Because we challenged each other on Smash Through to pick each other's mains on the things that we thought would help the other person the most to improve at Smash. And so for me, Matt Kling picked Roy, which is like one of the fastest characters in the game that cannot play the way that I typically play. And then I picked somebody with like a really weird recovery for Matt that also has trouble killing. And we're going to play each other in a best of 5 and then talk about what we learned for the last month before going back to our mains before the biggest Smash tournament either of us are going to play. So it's poetic timing, but those are kind of like the two other podcasts that I do. And then on this channel, Abe, we do a little series called Constructed Clash that was invented by me and Mason, and that Matt and I are continuing. And the next one will be Rakdos Vampires versus or not mono green, green
white devotion.
Green white devotion. It's so hard to like remember that. You can also follow Mason at Mason E. Clark, and you can email him at masoneclark@gmail.com for coaching. Just leave coaching in the description. That is going to do it. Hey, what'd you learn on the show this week?
I know that Roy's your boy.
Dude, can I go off of this for a second?
Sure.
It's been a long podcast, but like, so one of the things that I really liked about Smash, playing characters like Wolf, K. Rool, like the characters that I played, right, is that it was like a turn-based game at super speed, right? When you play a character who is like Roy, that is not how it works. You get multiple turns until you mess up, and then your turn then ends, and you have to know that you messed up to stop your opponent from getting a free time walk. Is basically how it works, and that's kind of hard to do. So for one, I already have bad reaction time. Like if you take like those reaction tests, like I already, it's why Matt picked it for me. However, I will say that Roy and Chrom, who are shadow characters of each other, or echo characters, are probably in my top 6 characters now. Like I really did dedicate myself to learning this new thing, this hard thing, and I treated it kind of like if you watched my streams back in the day of like learning mono red or learning aggro decks or learning. I'm gonna do a stream of learning combo decks probably this year on the YouTube channel. It is the same way. Like I really treated it that way, where it was like, dude, this character's really fast doing like these specific things, and it really did help my other characters. Like, I play a lot of Greninja, who's like a really fast character, and he plays more turn based than Roy does outside, but like his turns are fast. Like so, you can string something together, end your turn, right? Where Roy doesn't do that, right? He wants to. It's almost like you want to take every single action in a game of Magic, and don't let your opponent take any actions. Like they don't get an action, and it is also not how I play Magic. So, for context, one of my favorite characters to play is Pokemon Trainer, which is a character that plays. It's a really fast character, a mid-range character, and a heavy character. And what was really funny is my former co-host of Neatnerd was like, "This is just Teamer. Spencer literally is just playing Teamer in Smash, and that's like it's just his thing. Like that's how he wants to play all games all the time." So
the thing you said about like your characters being turn-based, I think is really, really it sparked something in me. I think we've talked about it before. Like turn-based, like platform fighter emulator kind of.
we talked about it on the show a lot. Where like
your only move is hustle.
Yeah, where oh wait, did we talk about this?
Your only move is hustle. It's like an open.
I don't know this. Tell me.
Okay, so it's a game. It's like actually, it's called. I'm looking up on itch because I was like, "What is the name of this?" Because my friends play it and they play a lot of like different fighting games and they like it a lot. But like it is a you can like play it as a 2-player turn-based fighter.
Oh wow, that sounds
of various things where like you can set like a time limit on putting in your next like input like window, and then you put in your inputs for like that window, and then it plays out, and you can do that like until like people take enough damage or whatever. So it's really interesting way to think about and like drill the skills of like, okay, what is it that I'm expecting my opponent to do?
Dude, that sounds so cool. Will you?
Yeah. I'll send you the link. Yeah.
Send me a link. I'll put it in the show notes too, because I know that people there are people that hate it when I talk about Smash on constructive criticism, and then there are people like Spencer, more Smash, like tell us like what you've been learning. And I'll just say this, like I said this on private Twitter, and I'll just say it now before the end of the show, but like my son is already getting sponsorship offers for Smash Bros. Because he's so young, people see his potential, and if that's going to happen, I have to move into like a coaching role for him so that he can do that. And so my Smash Bros will just basically disappear, and I'll be a Magic player again and a Smash coach for my son. But I'm excited for it. Yeah, thank you for letting me talk about that. By the way, it's always fun.
Also, so what did you learn?
Well, my learning there is like that also happens in Magic sometimes. For what it's worth, where you have decks that are trying to make it so your opponent can't take a turn, they can't take an action, and doing that at high speeds is one thing, but like breaking it down into honestly, I think a lot of us are trying to do that in Magic, right? Where we're trying to reduce our opponent's total number of actions that they could take, right? Like, break it down to as simple as something as this, Abe, where you're playing an aggressive deck, you have a combat trick, and you don't want to play that combat trick while your opponent can interact with it. You want to play it where it deals 4 damage, right? Or you want to play it where it kills a creature. And so you're trying to reduce their interaction points to your interaction points so that you get to take the most actions. And what's funny is that Magic historically was a turn-by-turn game that had a card advantage and life totals and all these different things. And in the last 5 years, it actually has become a more action-based game where if I can take 17 game actions to your 5, I'm actually probably winning.
Yeah, action economy is definitely gone up. And I think that's just tempo a bit as expressed in Smash specifically, right? Is the ability for you to take more actions and land more moves or whatever over the course of a game is just
yeah. I mean, you look
the more time you spend putting your opponent in hit stun, the more opportunity you have.
Well, think about a deck like Boros Convoke, right? Where which token am I supposed to interact with? Am I supposed to interact with your tokens? If I don't, they're just going to turn into actions later, between your resources, and it's very interesting. I don't know if other people have done the comparatives between Magic and fighting games. I think platform fighters probably fit better than regular fighting games because so much of that is memorizing inputs and stuff like that. Whereas platform fighters become much more turn based. But it is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked on the show before about, and we can move on from fighting games after this. We've talked before about the concept of neutral, and I think platform fighter neutral is a lot more like Magic neutral, where you use posturing as a way to limit your opponent's options and then use that to your advantage, and that's pretty cool. So, what did you learn on the show this week?
What I learned on the show this week? That was it. What you said.
What I said?
Yes.
You just copied me?
No, I just... it reminded me of this learning. I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but it reminded me that Magic is not always turn-based. That sometimes it's interaction-based. Right? And that I think that's weird for some players, where limiting your opponent's interactions is really what you're trying to do. I think of cards like Silence out of we just had that big modern tournament, right, where creativity had a bunch of silences in the sideboard. The only reason to do that is to limit your opponent's interactions, right? You're just saying, no, you don't get to interact now, it's my turn. And I think that playing somebody like Roy in Smash, sorry, this is so long-winded, is what that taught me. Is that Magic doesn't have to be Jund versus Grixis. That's not what Magic has to be. Magic can be whatever the parameters of the current format say that it can be, and what you can do. And that, I think, is sometimes hard for people. They play a lot of limited, they learn mid-range mirrors. They play a lot of standard, they learn really low power level stuff. They play a lot of modern, they expect games to go really fast and to win with minimal resources. You play a lot of legacy, you expect, it's scales, right? And the truth is that the decks that tend to do the best, such as this weekend, you put a 6/5 into play that demands you have a creature in play to even kill it. Suddenly you've shut off X number of decks in the format. They don't get to interact with this thing. Thank you everybody so much for listening. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a subscription, and we'll see you all next time.